You're not supposed to notice people like me, are you? The question caught Rose off guard. She looked up from her glowing laptop screen, eyes blurry from hours of spreadsheets and damage control, only to see the night janitor standing at the threshold of her office, quiet, unassuming, holding a spray bottle and cloth like a soldier at ease. His voice hadn't been confrontational. It was calm, observant, like he already knew the answer. Rose Carter, 26-year-old CEO of Carter Tech, blinked. "Excuse me?" Marcus Bell, 35, dark-skinned, broad-shouldered, in a gray uniform that had seen better days, didn't repeat himself. Instead, he offered a polite nod and stepped inside. He moved to the far end of her office, wiping down the glass-top table with methodical care. It was late, close to midnight, and the building had long emptied of anyone important. Anyone, that is, except the janitor and the woman whose name topped every headline in Silicon Valley that week. Rose tried to return to her screen, but her focus had splintered. Something about his words lingered. She stood, walked toward her desk, and that's when she saw it. A napkin, plain, folded once, sitting just off-center on her desk like it had been placed with care. She picked it up. The handwriting was neat, careful. "Don't let success make you forget how to love life." A shiver passed through her, not from fear but from familiarity. She looked up at Marcus, who had turned slightly, waiting for her to speak. "You left this?" she asked. He nodded, still holding the cloth. "Yes." "Why?" He met her gaze directly. "Because I saw a woman buried in numbers, and I thought she might need reminding." Rose swallowed. The words weren't wrong. She'd been running on caffeine, pressure, and pure willpower for weeks, trying to cover losses, patch over boardroom betrayals, appease investors who called her kid behind her back. She looked at the napkin again. The words were so simple, but they hit her harder than any investor report ever had. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus simply nodded and turned to leave. But something in Rose stopped him. "Marcus, how long have you worked here?" 3 years, he replied, not turning back. "Do you always leave notes?" "Only when I think they'll matter." She didn't know what to say to that. The door clicked shut behind him before she could find the words. That night, after locking up, she didn't go home right away. She went for a drive, no destination, windows down, letting Austin's humid summer air hit her face. The napkin lay folded on her passenger seat like it had always been hers. The next night, she stayed later than usual. Again, at 10:48 p.m., she slipped a fresh napkin onto his cart when he wasn't looking. Her handwriting was shakier, rushed. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. "Oh." She watched from her darkened office as Marcus read it, paused, and then just briefly smiled. And in that moment, a thread invisible to the world had begun to pull tight between them. Neither of them knew yet how much that thread would unravel, or how much it would rebuild. The following week passed with the quiet rhythm of routine, but for Rose, everything felt different. The office buzzed as usual, meetings stacked on top of meetings, assistants flitting past her glass walls like moths chasing light, and screens blinking with urgent emails from New York, Tokyo, Berlin. But beneath it all, a question began to grow louder in her mind. How had she worked here for 3 years and never truly noticed the people who cleaned her space, who emptied the bins, who moved like ghosts between the polished floors and frosted glass? She started staying later, not just to leave napkins for Marcus, though that had become a quiet ritual, but to observe, to listen, to feel the heartbeat of the building after hours. That was when it felt most honest. One night, well past 11, she sat on the low couch near the break room instead of at her desk. Marcus entered like clockwork, pushing his cart, head down, earbuds in. But when he spotted her, he pulled one earbud out and slowed his pace. "You're not working tonight?" he asked. Rose smiled softly, trying to remember how to sit still. He chuckled. "Harder than it sounds." She motioned toward the seat across from her. "Do you have a minute?" Marcus hesitated, glancing down the hallway as if someone might scold him. "Sure," he said, finally sitting, posture respectful but not nervous. "I realized I've been walking through this building every day like I own it, but I've never noticed what's underneath it all. The people who keep it standing. You." Marcus didn't respond right away. "You're not the only one," he said after a moment. "Most folks look through us. That's the job." She studied him, the quiet strength in his tone. "That's not right." "No, but it's normal," he replied. "There's a difference. That line hit her square in the chest. He didn't sound angry, just tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that grows from years of being erased. "What did you do before this?" she asked. "Before Carter Tech?" He shifted slightly. "I worked maintenance for the school district. Before that, HVAC, and before that, Army." That last part surprised her. "You served?" 6 years. Logistics. Got out, got married, tried to build something. His voice dipped. Then cancer happened. Rose didn't push. She didn't need to. The weight of that truth sat heavy in the air between them. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Marcus gave a small nod. "Thank you." She looked at him with new eyes. This man who'd survived war, love, and loss, now quietly mopping floors in a building filled with people who'd never ask his name. He wasn't invisible. He was essential, but only to those who bothered to see. The next morning, Rose walked through the building differently. She said hello to every custodian, every kitchen worker, every security guard. Some looked startled. One woman nearly dropped her clipboard, but a few smiled back. One even called her honey. Rose carried that with her all day like armor. Later that week, during an executive meeting, the CFO joked offhandedly about trimming the non-essential overnight expenses, pointing at the janitorial services budget. Rose sat up straighter. "I'd like to keep that untouched," she said. "They do more than clean. They preserve the soul of this place." A few board members blinked. One of them snorted. "The janitors preserve the soul." "Yes," Rose said flatly. "And if you paid attention, you'd know that." The room went quiet. After the meeting, her assistant Katie pulled her aside. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You've been different lately." Rose considered lying. But instead, she said, "I met someone who reminded me that people aren't invisible just because we choose not to look." Katie stared at her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Well, it's about time someone around here did." That night, Marcus found another napkin waiting for him. The greatest kindness is to see someone who isn't used to being seen. He folded it gently and tucked it into his pocket. The next night, he left her a small, tattered quote written on a notepad scrap. "My wife used to say, 'Some souls, clean rooms, some clean hearts.'" Rose read it 3 times before she realized she was crying. They never discussed the notes in person. It wasn't necessary. The words said enough. But what Rose didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that someone else had started to notice the exchanges. A young marketing assistant named Bria had seen Marcus pause outside Rose's office one night and slip a note under the door. She didn't think much of it at first, but in a company driven by gossip, any deviation from routine became fuel for speculation. By the end of the week, whispers began to ripple through the upper floors. "The CEO and the janitor?" one intern giggled. "Please. She's just being charitable," said another. But the tone wasn't kind. The laughter carried something else, judgment. And in the shadows of those hallways, the system that had long ignored Marcus began to turn its gaze toward him. A gaze not of recognition but of suspicion. If Marcus's quiet courage moved you, don't forget to hit like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what part of his story spoke to you the most. Your voice matters. It started with a change in the way people looked at her. Rose could feel it, like a low buzz in the air, something unspoken but heavy. In the elevators, voices would lower when she stepped in. During meetings, her suggestions were met with polite nods but fewer follow-ups. Her assistant, Katie, who used to laugh freely in the hallway, now chose her words more carefully. Rose had been in the corporate world long enough to recognize the signs. Someone was stirring the pot. One morning, as she entered the building earlier than usual, she caught 2 junior associates whispering near the coffee station. When they noticed her, they quickly scattered. Rose didn't ask. She didn't need to. By the time she reached her office, an email was waiting anonymous, unsigned, just one sentence. "Watch who you let in after hours." She stared at it for a long time before deleting it. But the damage had already been done. The seed of caution had been planted. That night, she stayed even later than usual. When Marcus arrived at 10:50, she was already seated at the far end of the hallway in a low chair, pretending to review paperwork. He paused when he saw her. "Rough day?" he asked gently. "Depends on who you ask," she replied. "You?" "The same," he said, then added, "though my day's always cleaner than my past." She smiled at that, but her eyes didn't follow. He noticed. Something wrong? Rose hesitated. There are. Rumors. About us? She nodded. They think there's something going on. That I'm… She caught herself, being unprofessional. Marcus didn't seem surprised. It was only a matter of time. I never meant for this to become a spectacle. You didn't make it one, he said, his voice steady. They did. But Rose couldn't ignore the weight of her position. The double standard. The quiet but potent ways the corporate world punished those who stepped outside the unspoken boundaries of class and power. You think I should stop? She asked. Stop what? Talking to you, leaving notes. Marcus looked at her with something deeper than disappointment. It was understanding laced with sadness. If you stop because it's what you believe, I'll respect it. But if you stop because they're afraid of kindness, then you're not the leader I thought you were. That landed harder than anything she'd expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She looked away, jaw tightening. They think I'm weak, she said. That I'm distracted, vulnerable. Then show them what real strength looks like, Marcus replied. Compassion isn't weakness. It's the only thing that's ever made power human. The next morning, Rose walked into the executive suite like nothing had changed, but something had. She was sharper, more alert. She spoke with clarity, defended her team with measured fire, and held her ground like the floor itself might shift beneath her. But beneath it all, a quiet resolve had taken root. That night, she wrote another napkin. Some storms don't come to disrupt your life. They come to clear your path. She placed it carefully on Marcus's cart and left without waiting to see his reaction. What neither of them knew was that someone else had intercepted it. Bria, the young assistant, had been watching again, and this time she took the napkin, photographed it, and sent it to her cousin in corporate HR. The next day, Marcus was called into a small, windowless room near the back of the building. 2 HR reps, both in suits too stiff for comfort, sat across from him with folded hands and tight smiles. We've received reports about interactions between you and upper management, one began, specifically with Miss Carter. Marcus kept his face neutral. Yes? There are concerns about boundaries, about appearances. We've spoken. That's not against policy. And yet, there are questions about the nature of those exchanges, the second rep added, about whether they're appropriate. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You mean if a black janitor's too familiar with a white CEO? The room went silent. One of the reps cleared her throat. Let's keep this professional. I am, Marcus said. You're the ones trying to turn kindness into misconduct. They gave him a formal warning. No suspension, no termination. But the message was clear. Stay in your place. That evening, Rose waited for Marcus longer than usual. When he didn't show up, she checked the security feed. Nothing. His name was still on the schedule, but his cart remained untouched. The hallway was too quiet. When she finally tracked him down in the loading bay, he was stacking supplies with measured force. They called you in, didn't they? She asked. Marcus nodded. They're watching now. Because of me. No, he said, meeting her eyes. Because of us. Rose felt the sting behind her eyes, but didn't let it show. I won't let them do this. You might not have a choice, he replied. But we do have a voice. And if enough people hear it, maybe they'll remember that justice isn't just a word printed on a policy. She wanted to say more, but instead she handed him a folded napkin, this one heavier than the rest. Inside, not a quote but a question. Are you willing to be seen, even when it costs you? Marcus looked at it, then looked at her. Always. And with that, the quiet war had begun, not with shouting or protests, but with glances, whispers, and a decision. To be seen, no matter the price. The next morning came with a strange stillness. Rose walked into Carter Tech's glossy marble lobby under the sterile glow of overhead lights that had never felt so cold. She smiled at the front desk guard, but he barely nodded back. The temperature wasn't in the air, it was in the glances, in the way people stopped talking when she passed. Her heels clicked louder than usual on the tile. She used to command respect. Now she felt watched, measured, judged. But if they expected her to flinch, they didn't know her well enough. That afternoon, she called a full department town hall, something she hadn't done since her appointment as CEO. The room filled quickly. Tech leads, project managers, junior engineers all filed in, many with skeptical expressions. Rumors had a way of becoming poison, slow but deadly. I know there's been talk, she began, standing without a podium, and I won't waste your time denying what you've heard. Silence. She let it hang. Yes, I've been speaking with one of our night custodians. His name is Marcus Bell. He's a veteran. He's lost more than many of us can imagine, and he's taught me more about this company's soul than some of our highest-paid consultants. A ripple moved through the room. Some arms crossed, others leaned forward. I'm not ashamed of that. In fact, I'm grateful, because if Carter Tech is going to survive the decade, we need more than innovation, we need integrity. That starts with seeing every single person who contributes to our success, whether they're holding a laptop or a mop. A few jaws dropped. Katie, standing near the side, gave the faintest nod of approval, but not everyone was convinced. Later that evening, as Rose passed through the design wing, she overheard a pair of senior developers whispering. "This is what happens when you put emotions above logic," one said. "She's too young for this role. Too emotional, too naive." They didn't notice she was behind them. Rose didn't say a word. She just walked on. But she didn't forget. That night, she didn't stay late. Instead, she drove across town to a quiet residential street and parked outside a modest, weather-worn duplex. She sat there for 5 minutes before working up the courage to knock. Marcus answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, surprised but not displeased. "Rose? I didn't know where else to go." He opened the door wider. "Come in." His living room was simple. An old couch, books stacked on a milk crate, a photo of a woman on the mantel. Rose paused in front of it. "Your wife?" He nodded. "Danielle, breast cancer. Took her in 9 months." "I'm sorry," Rose whispered. "You already said that," he replied gently. "But thank you." She sat, hands clenched. "They're turning against me, Marcus." Slowly, like a tide pulling back. "I tried to speak up today, but I don't think it changed anything." "You expected one speech to fix years of blind spots?" "No," she sighed, "but I thought it might remind them." Marcus sat across from her, not judging, just present. "Change isn't comfortable, especially for people who've benefited from the way things are. You stirred something. What if I stirred too much?" "Then stir harder." She looked at him, eyes wide. "What?" "You've got their attention now, so use it. Don't just defend me. Defend all of us. Speak louder, not just in meetings in public, in press, in hiring, in culture. Make it part of the company's spine." Rose nodded slowly, the fire returning. "We start with visibility," she said. "We bring the invisible into the light." That week, she proposed a new internal campaign called Faces of Carter Tech. Each week, an employee from an often overlooked department would be highlighted: cleaning crew, cafeteria staff, night security with interviews, photos, personal stories. The board resisted. "Too political," one member scoffed. "This isn't a charity." But Rose stood firm. "It's not charity. It's reality. And if you want the next generation of talent, you'll need to show them we care about people, not just profit." Against expectations, the campaign launched. The first profile was of Clara, a Guatemalan woman who'd worked the night shift cleaning the North Wing for 7 years. Her story of working 2 jobs to send her daughter to college went viral on LinkedIn. Suddenly, people were paying attention, not just to Clara, but to the quiet army of workers behind the glossy walls of Carter Tech. Rose watched the tide begin to shift, not all at once, but in glimmers. Some employees stopped to talk with the janitors. Some even asked Marcus his name. But where light shines, shadows stretch. One morning, Katie entered Rose's office, pale. "There's a leak." "What kind of leak?" "Internal emails, photos, the Napkin quotes. Someone sent them to a tech blog. They're spinning it into a scandal." Rose felt the floor tilt beneath her. "What are they saying?" "That you're in an inappropriate relationship, that you've compromised judgment, that you're pushing political agendas through the company." Rose's jaw clenched. "Let me guess, anonymous source." Katie nodded. "Likely someone from upper management, maybe even the board." That evening, Rose sat alone in her dark office, watching the city lights blink like stars she couldn't touch. On her desk sat another napkin. Not from her this time, from Marcus. "Truth is quiet. Lies scream. Stay with the quiet." She pressed it to her chest. The storm was coming, but she wasn't going to run. The headlines hit faster than she could brace. CEO's secret affairs with janitor spark ethical concerns. One article blared. Another, too young, too soft. Is Rose Carter ruining Carter Tech from the inside? The smear campaign had teeth, and it bit hard. Within hours, Rose's inbox was flooded. Some supportive old mentors, a few friends from college, but most were cold, terse, or thinly veiled threats from board members cloaked in concern. Her publicist was panicking, legal was scrambling, and PR had already begun drafting an apology she had no intention of releasing. "They want a press conference," Katie whispered, placing the printed draft gently on Rose's desk as if it were a loaded weapon, "or at least a formal statement that distances you from Marcus." Rose stared at the paper. Words that sounded nothing like her, sanitized, robotic, and most importantly, cowardly. She slid it back across the desk. "Number," Katie blinked. "Rose, if we don't say something, then let silence speak louder," she said. Her voice wasn't shaking, not anymore. At that moment, Rose knew the tide wasn't just against her. It was against everything she stood for. And tides, she thought, only matter if you're not willing to swim. That night, she didn't go home. Instead, she drove back to the duplex. Marcus opened the door before she even knocked. "I saw it," he said. "Every lie, every comment." She stepped inside without a word, slumping into the same couch as before. "They want me to apologize, to call you a mistake." Marcus sat down slowly, knees cracking slightly. "Would it help you survive?" She turned her head toward him. "I'm not sure I want to survive if I have to betray the only honest thing I've known in this industry." A moment passed. Then Marcus spoke, softly. "You know, when I served overseas, they taught us that silence was strategic. Sometimes, to live, you had to move quietly. But silence only works on the battlefield. In life, silence just means surrender." She looked up, eyes sharp now. "Then let's make noise." The next day, Rose walked into the boardroom, where the 12 highest-ranking executives of Carter Tech sat in polished suits and colder expressions. She didn't wait for them to speak. "You're all wondering if I'll fold, if I'll kneel to save face. But I didn't take this job to be agreeable. I took it because this company needed change." The CFO scoffed. "You've brought chaos." "No," she said firmly. "I exposed the chaos you were comfortable ignoring." She threw down a stack of papers. Internal reports, pay disparities, unethical outsourcing contracts, demographic breakdowns of hiring numbers that didn't lie. "This isn't about a janitor. This is about a mirror you're afraid to look into." One board member, a gray-haired woman named Joyce, leaned forward. "And what do you suggest, Rose? That we rebuild our entire company image around one employee's tragic backstory?" "No," Rose said. "I'm suggesting we tell the truth. About everyone. About the people who actually keep this place alive while we sit in corner offices pretending we're gods." The room fell into heavy silence. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry. But a few, just a few, looked thoughtful. That night, Rose received an unsigned envelope slipped under her office door. Inside was a typed note. "You're not as alone as you think. Keep going." No name, no hint, but it was enough. Over the next week, the company's social feed exploded with traction, not about the scandal, but because of the continued Faces of Carter Tech campaign. The human stories struck chords. A cafeteria cook who'd fed homeless shelters for years, a mailroom clerk who wrote poetry by night, and yes, Marcus, his story ran on week 4. It was honest, unvarnished. It spoke of loss, of redemption, of scrubbing bathroom floors with dignity. Comments poured in. Veterans, single parents, dreamers. It became more than a campaign. It became a movement. But just as momentum grew, another blow came. Marcus was suspended. No explanation, no process. Just a cold email stating, "Temporary leave pending internal investigation." Rose stormed into HR. "What is this?" she demanded. The director, a man named Langford with slick-back hair and nervous eyes, avoided her gaze. "We're concerned about company image. Until things cool off. You don't get to bench people like they're replaceable chess pieces," she snapped. "Especially not while they're under fire for nothing more than existing." "Rose," he said cautiously, "you're pushing too hard. You're risking the whole board turning on you." She leaned in, eyes dark and unblinking. "Let them." That evening, Rose sat alone in Marcus's apartment. He wasn't there out walking, clearing his head, but she needed to be close to the only place that still felt steady. On the kitchen table, an old notebook sat open. Half-written poems, observations. One line stood out in bold ink. Justice doesn't wear a suit, it wears calluses. When Marcus returned, he found her still seated, the note in her hand. They suspended you, she said softly. He nodded. I figured they would. You should sue, go public. And become another token? Another angry black man headline? Then what do we do? She asked. We keep writing, he said. Not with pens, with action, with truth, with decency. And when they try to erase us, we write louder. She looked up, something between fire and fear in her eyes. What if they push me out next? Marcus shrugged. Then we'll build something better, and you'll lead it not because of who you are, but because of what you refuse to be. She stood slowly, walked toward him. This isn't just about us anymore. It never was, he replied. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual indifference. But inside that small apartment, something unshakable was forming. Not a scandal, not a romance. A rebellion quiet, steady, and forged in truth. The morning Marcus returned to Carter Tech's headquarters not as an employee, but as a civilian with a purpose. The air trembled with quiet curiosity. He wasn't wearing his janitor's uniform. He wore a navy blazer and pressed jeans. His posture upright, his stride measured. The lobby security guard, usually indifferent, stood as he approached. I need to see Miss Carter, Marcus said calmly. The guard hesitated, then reached for the phone. 5 minutes later, Rose met him in the elevator lobby, eyes wide. What are you doing here? You said we write louder, he replied. I've got a pen. You got paper? She pulled him into her office, drawing the blinds as whispers echoed down the hall. You shouldn't be here. They could twist this. They already have, he cut in. But it doesn't matter. I know who I am now. You gave me that. She opened a file on her desk notes, statements, testimonies from other employees who'd experienced subtle silencing, bias, and retaliatory tactics. I've been collecting stories, quiet ones, the kind no one reports because they don't want trouble. But this company, it's been wearing a mask, and I think it's time we rip it off. Marcus studied the notes. This is your line in the sand. It's our line, she corrected. That afternoon, Rose scheduled a private meeting with Joyce, the one board member who hadn't outright opposed her. Joyce, older than most, with eyes that had seen decades of corporate spin, sat quietly as Rose unfolded her case. I'm not asking you to side with me, Rose said. I'm asking you to stand on the right side of history. Joyce remained still. Then, you know what this will cost? Yes. Do you think it'll matter in 5 years? If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. Joyce tapped her nails against the oak table. Then let's get you an audience. The next morning, the board convened in a confidential session. Not to fire Rose, not yet, but to hear her out. As she stood before them, PowerPoint remote in hand, she didn't use charts or graphs. She used faces, stories, audio clips, moments. Clara talking about missing her daughter's graduation because she couldn't afford a day off. An overnight tech who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times, despite perfect reviews. A black receptionist who'd been mistaken for a temp for 5 years. Rose let the silence after each story linger. These aren't just minor concerns, she said. They're patterns. And if we keep ignoring them, they'll become our legacy. A voice from the corner, the COO, interrupted. And what do you propose? That we rebrand Carter Tech as a social justice think tank? No, she answered. I propose we become a place where truth isn't feared, where talent is recognized before titles, where people aren't invisible until they leave or break. The chairman leaned forward, steepling his fingers. And if we say no, then I resign, Rose said without blinking. And I go public. The air cracked. She had their attention, maybe not their support, but they knew now she wasn't bluffing. That afternoon, Marcus returned home to find a letter in his mailbox, no return address. Inside was a single sentence typed in all caps. You should have stayed invisible. He didn't show Rose immediately. He knew what it meant. Visibility comes at a price. But he also knew he wasn't afraid anymore. At least, not of them. That evening, Rose and Marcus sat on his porch, watching the sun fall behind the city skyline. They'll try to bury you, Marcus said. They've already started. Good, Rose replied. Let them try. I'm not made of dirt. I'm made of fire. He smiled at that. You weren't always. No, she agreed. But you reminded me who I could be. Just then, a car pulled up across the street. The engine idled, tinted windows, unmoving. Marcus tensed. You expecting someone? Rose shook her head. The car stayed for 5 minutes, then drove off. The message was clear. They were being watched. The next day, someone leaked security footage to an online tabloid, grainy images of Marcus and Rose hugging in her office. The headline twisted it into scandal. Inappropriate workplace relationship continues despite internal warning. The board demanded another meeting, this time with legal. Joyce pulled Rose aside beforehand. They're cornering you. Then I'll break the walls, Rose replied. I'm done hiding. She entered the meeting with calm defiance. If you plan to fire me, say it now, she said. Because I'm not going to discredit Marcus. I'm not going to apologize for standing with him. And if I go, I'll walk straight into a press conference and tell the whole truth about the harassment, the cover-ups, and the fear culture. The general counsel leaned back, annoyed. You think threats win battles? No, Rose said, but truth does. After the meeting, Katie caught up with her in the stairwell. They're rattled, she whispered. Some of them are talking about settling, quiet reforms, maybe even reinstating Marcus quietly with back pay. That's not enough, Rose said. We don't just want crumbs, we want a seat at the table. Then be ready, Katie warned. They're not done playing dirty. That night a tweet went viral. Not from Carter Tech, but from a well-known journalist who'd caught wind of the internal memo in Marcus's story. The post read, "One janitor, one napkin, one CEO who refused to look away. Maybe Tech's finally waking up." Suddenly, Number Napkin Truth trended. Former employees shared similar stories. The quiet became a chorus. Rose knew the war was far from over. But for the first time since that day in the hallway, when a napkin had changed everything, she didn't feel alone, and neither did Marcus. The next phase wasn't about survival, it was about revolution, and it had already begun. The days that followed were anything but quiet. The hashtag number Napkin Truth had grown into something no one could have predicted. It wasn't just about Rose and Marcus anymore. It was about the quiet ones, the unseen ones, the people who swept the floors, brewed the coffee, answered phones, maintained servers, and stayed long after executives had gone home. Journalists began circling like hawks, hungry for comment, digging into Carter Tech's records, old lawsuits, former employees now emboldened to speak. Meanwhile, inside the walls of Carter Tech, the atmosphere shifted. People looked over their shoulders. The comfortable ones felt the walls tighten. The silent ones began to stand taller. And in the center of the storm was Rose, not retreating, not apologizing, but steady like a lighthouse that refused to dim, no matter how violent the wind. Marcus had returned to work, but not quietly. He wore his blue uniform with the same pride he had worn his Navy medals. But now, he also carried a voice. He smiled more. He spoke at employee meetings. He became the subject of a feature article in a major publication, "The Janitor Who Cleaned Up More Than Floors." One afternoon, as he was mopping the break room, a young coder approached him. She looked barely 20, nervous. "Mr. Marcus?" He turned, surprised. "Just Marcus is fine." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave. For making it okay to say something." She scurried off before he could respond, cheeks flushed. Later that day, Marcus found a folded note in his locker. It read, "You're not invisible anymore. They're watching you." There was no signature. That night, as he sat with Rose in her apartment far from the prying eyes of Carter Tech's glass towers, he showed her the note. Her hands shook as she read it. "Do you think it's a threat?" she asked, "or a warning?" "Maybe both," he said, "but I'm not running," Rose sighed. "They'll try something. A bigger blow, one meant to discredit you for good. Then we stay ahead of it," Marcus replied. "Tell our story before they twist it." "All of it?" she asked. He nodded. "All of it." So, they began writing. Together. Rose reached out to a trusted journalist she knew from college, a woman named Dana, known for her fearless reporting. Dana met them at a diner at 6 a.m., far from downtown, no cameras, just coffee, tape recorders, and truth. Marcus told his story, his wife's death, his honorable discharge. his struggle to provide for his son, his years of cleaning offices where no one looked him in the eye. Rose shared her part, what it meant to inherit a legacy built on silence and what it cost her to break it. Dana listened. She asked hard questions, but she never looked away. When the article dropped 2 weeks later, the world paused. The napkin that changed a billion-dollar company. It was raw, honest, undeniably human. It didn't paint them as heroes, it painted them as real. And that's why it worked. The fallout came fast. Investors called emergency meetings. Employees rallied. A petition circulated to restructure the board. Marcus was asked to speak at a major industry conference, first as a novelty, then as a voice that couldn't be ignored. But just as the wave rose, the counterstrike hit. A leaked video surfaced, grainy footage from years ago, showing Marcus in a bar fight shortly after his wife's funeral. It was violent, it was ugly, and it spread like wildfire. News anchors questioned his character. Pundits asked if Rose had been blinded by emotion. Social media split into two camps, those who forgave and those who crucified. Rose watched the chaos unfold with clenched fists. When she stormed into the boardroom the next morning, some members smirked. "Still think he's your hero?" one asked. She didn't flinch. "He is," she said, "and if you spent half as much time listening as you do digging through dirt, you'd realize he's not the man in that video anymore." Public image matters, Rose. So does redemption. Later, she found Marcus sitting alone in the park across the street, eyes locked on the fountain. "I should have told you," he said without turning. "I wasn't always calm. Grief made me someone else for a while." She sat beside him. "That doesn't erase who you are now, but it'll be the headline. Only if we let it." That evening, Rose went live. Not through a PR firm, not with makeup or lighting or spin. Just her phone, her voice, and the truth. She told the world what Marcus had been through. She didn't excuse it. She contextualized it. She explained the cost of grief, the ache of racism, the struggle of rebuilding. She didn't beg for sympathy. She demanded understanding. The live video reached 1 million views in 24 hours. Thousands shared their own stories of rage, of regret, of resurrection. Carter Tech had become a mirror for something much bigger. A week later, the board made their move. A vote of no confidence, an attempt to oust her quietly. But Joyce stood up, and this time, so did 2 others. The vote failed, barely, but enough. That night, Marcus sat across from Rose, a glass of red wine in his hand. "You realize," he said, "this is more than just saving a company." "I know," she said. "It's about saving the soul of something bigger." "America?" he asked, smiling. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe just ourselves." And for the first time in weeks, they laughed. Not because the storm had passed, but because they'd learned how to dance in the rain. The Monday after the failed vote felt different. The usual sterile hum of Carter Tech's headquarters now carried a current, electric, unpredictable. People who once walked with eyes down now made eye contact. Hushed greetings replaced silent passings in the hallway. Marcus arrived early, dressed in his janitor uniform as always. But something about the way he carried himself had shifted. Not heavier, not louder, just fuller. As if he'd finally expanded into the space he was always meant to occupy. At 8:06 a.m., he stepped into an elevator, headed for the executive floor. An intern, no older than 23, flinched when she saw him. Not out of fear, but hesitation, the social reflex of someone unsure if they should say something. "You're him, right?" she asked. Marcus smiled, pressing the button for floor 12. "Depends who you think I am. The napkin guy." "Then yeah, that's me. My mom read your story," she said. She cried, said she finally understood what my dad meant when he said, "You can scrub a floor so clean they'll eat off it, but they still won't see your face." Marcus's face softened. "Your dad sounds like a wise man. He passed 2 years ago." She looked down. "He would have liked you." Before Marcus could respond, the elevator doors opened, and she rushed off. But her words stayed with him like a weight wrapped in warmth. Across the building, Rose was bracing for what she knew would come next, a power play, one not through the boardroom, but through whispers and red tape. She was pulled into a compliance meeting. Legal jargon flew like arrows. "Protocol violations," they said. "Unprofessional intimacy," they added. "Breach of fiduciary conduct," someone muttered. She sat through it all, her face unreadable. When it was over, she stood, not offering a word of defense. "You're trying to drown me in paperwork," she said quietly. "But the flood's already come, and you're the ones without a raft." She walked out, her heels echoing like drumbeats against marble. Meanwhile, Bria, once a ghost in Rose's shadow, now hovered like a hawk. She had made her allegiances clear. She wanted the corner office, and she was willing to play dirty to get it. That afternoon, a suspicious email surfaced, an old internal note from Rose, jokingly calling the board out-of-touch fossils. Taken out of context, it painted her as ageist, arrogant. Bria forwarded it anonymously to the press. Headlines flared. CEO's past emails reveal contempt for leadership. Rose didn't flinch. She called a company, wide town hall. No PR spin, no teleprompter, just a microphone and an open floor. "I wrote that email 4 years ago," she began. "I was frustrated, and I used sarcasm instead of strategy. But let me be clear, my mistake wasn't the frustration. It was the tone. The truth behind it still stands. We cannot lead with blindfolds on. We cannot claim progress while our foundation crumbles beneath voices we refuse to hear." Someone in the back clapped. Then more followed. Bria stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, lips tight. She hadn't expected the crowd to side with Rose. That night, Marcus received another envelope. No return address. Inside was a copy of his son's school report card, highlighted in red. A disciplinary note from 3 weeks prior. James left class without permission and was found crying in the hallway. When asked why, he said, "They said my dad's a criminal." Marcus's throat closed. This wasn't just about him anymore. They were dragging his son into it. The next morning, he walked into Carter Tech not as a janitor but as a father. Straight to HR, straight to the point. "You come for me, that's one thing. But you go after my kid? That's war," Har stammered. Denied involvement, promised an investigation. But Marcus had stopped listening. His eyes had gone cold. That evening, he and Rose sat in a diner booth, heads low, voices hushed. "They're testing our limits," she said, "trying to bait you into snapping." "I've played their game long enough," Marcus replied. "It's time we change the rules." "How? We don't play defense anymore." Rose leaned back. "You mean, we go public, bigger, a live interview, together, national stage. Let them try to hide when the whole country's watching." Rose hesitated. "You're ready for that?" "I'm ready to stop surviving and start living." Days later, the interview was booked prime time, national news, live broadcast. The anchors prepped their questions. Some would be fair, others sharp as knives. But Rose and Marcus were ready. The night before the interview, Rose visited Marcus's apartment. James was asleep on the couch, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Rose watched him for a moment. "He's got your eyes," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "I just hope he doesn't have to fight the same battles." "Then let's finish this," she said, "so he doesn't have to." Marcus met her gaze. "Side by side?" "Always." The next evening, as lights blazed and cameras rolled, America tuned in, to hear not just a story of a napkin and a janitor, but of power and pain, of choices and consequences, of standing up when silence would be easier. The world watched, the world listened, and the walls around Carter Tech began to tremble. The camera's red light blinked on, and for a moment, all time seemed to freeze. The studio was dim except for the glare of spotlights trained on Rose and Marcus. Across the country, millions of viewers held their breath, tuned in not for scandal or spectacle, but for truth, or perhaps something more human, something rarely shown on primetime. The anchor, a woman known for her poise and pointed questions, began without small talk. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. King, thank you for joining us. Let's start with the obvious. Why now?" Rose inhaled deeply. "Because silence was easy, and easy doesn't change anything," Marcus added. "Because when the system calls you invisible long enough, speaking up becomes a form of survival." The interview unfolded like a tapestry, raw threads of pain, woven with moments of resilience. Rose spoke of inheriting power she didn't earn, and the awakening that came from seeing who was crushed beneath it. Marcus shared stories that never made it into resumes, racist remarks muttered as jokes, promotions that passed him by, being asked to use the freight elevator even when the main one was empty. The anchor leaned forward. "Some critics say this is performative, that you're using emotion to distract from corporate failings." Rose didn't blink. They're right that we failed, but they're wrong about why we're here. This isn't performance, it's confession and accountability. And you, Mr. King, I didn't ask to be seen, I asked to be heard. There's a difference. Then came the clip. The anchor introduced it with a warning. It was the bar fight footage, brutal, unfiltered. The screen flashed briefly before cutting back to the studio. "That's you," she said to Marcus. "Yes," he answered, steady. "That was me, in a moment of grief I didn't know how to carry. I won't justify it, but I won't hide from it either. We all carry our worst days. Some of us just don't get to keep them private." The silence after his words wasn't awkward. It was reverent. When the segment ended, the network cut to commercial, but in living rooms, cafes, and bars across the nation, the conversation had only just begun. Within an hour, Cartertech's website crashed under the weight of traffic. Social media exploded. Number Stand with Marcus trended. People from every walk of life, teachers, veterans, janitors, CEOs posted their own stories of being overlooked, misjudged, or broken and rebuilt. Back at the office, Bria paced in her glass-walled corner. She had underestimated them. She'd expected shame, retraction, maybe a resignation, not a movement. She called an emergency board meeting. "They're hijacking our narrative," she snapped. "It's us or them now." "No," Joyce said slowly. "It's them, because of us. And frankly, I'm tired of being on the wrong side of this." Two other members nodded. Bria stared in disbelief. "You're seriously going to let a janitor and a bleeding heart CEO dictate our legacy?" "No," said one of the older board members. "We're going to let them salvage it." That night, Marcus walked into the quiet lobby of Cartertech alone. He paused, looking up at the massive digital display that usually scrolled stock prices and internal memos. Now it displayed one message in bold white letters: "See us, hear us, value us." Underneath, in smaller print, voices from within Cartertech, employee testimonials, cycled on the screen stories of overlooked labor, of pride in invisible work, of quiet dignity. Marcus watched, stunned. The message had traveled further than he realized. Upstairs, Rose sat in her office, the door open for the first time in months. Staff passed by and waved. One brought her a coffee without being asked. Small acts, but meaningful. Marcus entered without knocking. She looked up, smiling. "You saw it?" "Yeah, I did." "You think it's real?" "It's starting to be." She closed her laptop. "I got a call from a labor advocacy group. They want to consult with us on new policy frameworks, equity, inclusion, wage reform. It's bigger than us now." "Good," Marcus said. Then after a pause, "But it's not over." "No," she agreed. "It's just beginning." The next day, the board met again, this time publicly, live-streamed by demand. Rose presented a plan, a revised charter emphasizing worker dignity, transparent leadership, and community investment. Marcus stood beside her as co-chair of the new Employee Equity Council. When the vote came, the result was unanimous. Bria abstained, then quietly left the room. No one stopped her. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in quiet amber, Marcus took James to the park. The boy ran ahead, free, laughing. A stranger approached Marcus, an elderly white man with soft eyes and a Vietnam veteran's hat. "I saw you on television," he said. "That took guts." Marcus nodded. "Sometimes it takes more to stay quiet. I spent years not seeing people like you," the man admitted. "Didn't even know I was doing it." Marcus smiled gently. "Thank you for saying that." They shook hands. Across the park, James waved. "Dad, come play." And for the first time in a long while, Marcus ran toward his son, toward a future not free of pain, but full of purpose. Far away, in homes all across America, others were running too. Toward truth, toward equity, toward the light. Marcus stood outside the church, the evening sun casting long shadows over the steps. It wasn't Sunday, and he wasn't there for a sermon. Inside, a memorial was being held for Tomas, the former security guard at Cartertech, who had passed away quietly just weeks before. Tomas had worked the night shift for 23 years. Most people didn't even know his name. Marcus did. They used to share coffee during shift change. "You don't see the ghosts in this building," Tomas once said. "But we're here, keeping it standing." Now, with a single photo propped on an easel and the scent of wax candles in the air, Marcus stood to speak. Tomas used to say we were the bricks no one noticed, holding up the tower. I think he was wrong about one thing. We're not bricks, we're people. And people deserve to be seen, even after they're gone. As Marcus sat down, Rose, seated 2 rows behind, met his eyes and gave a slow, steady nod. After the service, she pulled him aside. That was beautiful, she said. He deserved more, Marcus replied. They all do. Then let's give it to them, she said. There's something I want you to see. Later that evening, Rose brought Marcus to a nondescript building on the edge of the city. This used to be one of our old data centers, she said, unlocking the door. We moved servers years ago, but kept the lease. I want to convert it into something new, a learning center, training, job placement, healthcare navigation, a place for people like Tomas, like my father, like you who've done the work but never got the support. Marcus walked through the dim space, imagining it filled with light, with people learning and building futures. What would you call it? He asked. The King Center, she said, without hesitation. Not just for you, but for what the name stands for. Marcus swallowed hard, emotion rising uninvited. You sure they'll support this? Some won't, she said. But those who matter will. The following week the announcement hit the press. Local news, national headlines, even global outlets. Carter Tech CEO funds community center with janitor turned advocate. The backlash was immediate. Some shareholders called it misuse of funds. Anonymous voices accused Rose of being woke for profit. Bria, though silent since her departure, released a statement subtly criticizing the move as philanthropy without business foresight. Rose responded with a simple message at the next board meeting. If the business you're protecting cannot survive equity, then it was never built to last. Behind closed doors, one investor threatened to pull funding. This isn't about innovation anymore, he hissed. It's about moral theater, Rose replied. Then I suggest you invest in another stage. Not all responses were critical. Donations began pouring in. Letters, emails, testimonials from strangers, truck drivers, single mothers, veterans, former felons who had cleaned offices for decades without recognition. They called the King Center a beacon, a chance. One letter stood out. It came from the principal of James's school. Mr. King, it read, your son recently stood up during a school assembly and told his classmates that his dad helps fix the world, one mop and one word at a time. We thought you'd like to know. Marcus read the letter twice before folding it and placing it in his wallet behind a photo of his late wife. You'd be proud, he whispered. As construction began on the King Center, Marcus found himself at the site every day, often with James by his side. The boy helped paint signs, carried tools too heavy for his small hands, and asked endless questions. Will there be a room with books? Yes. And computers? Definitely. And can I come here when I grow up? Marcus smiled. You won't need to, kid, but you can come teach. Meanwhile, inside Carter Tech, quiet shifts became policy. The Employee Equity Council, co-chaired by Marcus, began drafting real changes, hiring practices, living wages, transparency, and promotions. Rose pushed each initiative forward, navigating resistance with calm resolve. During one late-night strategy session, Rose asked Marcus, "Do you ever feel like this is too big?" He nodded. "All the time. And yet we keep going. Because the alternative is going back," he said. "And we've come too far for that." By early spring, the King Center opened its doors. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest, per Marcus's request. No celebrity endorsements, no flashy press. Just community members, former janitors, factory workers, and people who'd been waiting for someone to say, "We see you." Rose gave the opening speech. "This isn't about charity. It's about correction. We built a world that let some rise and left others buried beneath them. Today, we begin to lift the foundation." As applause filled the room, Marcus stepped forward. He looked out at the crowd, so many faces once dismissed, now shining with purpose. "I used to think justice was a courtroom word," he said. "But sometimes it's a mop. Sometimes it's a letter on a napkin. And sometimes it's a building like this." In the corner, James clapped the loudest. Outside, a mural had been painted along the wall of the King Center. It showed a pair of worn hands holding up a building made of paper, wire, and light. Beneath it, in bold lettering, "We are the hands that hold the future." As the sun set that evening, casting gold across the freshly painted walls, Marcus sat beside Rose on the steps. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence said it all. They had started something bigger than either of them, and it was only just beginning. It was a Thursday when the storm hit, not the kind that soaked the city in rain, but the kind that crept in through headlines and backdoor whispers. Rose sat in her office, the room silent except for the buzz of her phone vibrating non-stop. An anonymous whistleblower had leaked internal documents from Carter Tech memos from Bria's era, outlining illegal outsourcing, unpaid contract labor, and manipulated safety reports. Though the documents predated Rose's leadership, the press didn't care. The headlines read, "Carter Tech under fire for past exploitation, CEO linked to scandal." In the break room, employees stared at the television, mouths agape. "They'll drag her down," someone muttered. "This isn't just about her," Marcus said, standing in the doorway. "This is about us, about what we've been building." Back in her office, Rose stared at her reflection in the window. The city shimmered below, but her mind felt heavy with the weight of legacy. A knock pulled her from thought. Marcus entered without waiting. "I saw it," he said. "I know. They're going to use this to erase everything we've done." Rose turned to him. "Then we speak. Not just to defend, but to lead. Together? Always." The next day, a press conference was announced. Cameras clustered outside Carter Tech like vultures. Marcus adjusted his tie nervously. "I'm used to mops, not microphones," he said. Rose grinned. "You're more eloquent than half the boardroom." As they approached the podium, Rose opened the folder in her hands, then closed it again. "No speeches," she said. "Just truth." She stepped forward. "The documents you've seen are real. They reveal a dark part of Carter Tech's history, one rooted in greed, in neglect, in systems that silenced the most vulnerable. Though these actions were not taken under my leadership, I stand here to say, we are not denying them, we are dismantling them." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled, lenses zoomed in. "We cannot move forward without acknowledging where we failed," she continued. "That's why Carter Tech is launching an independent reparations board. We will contact every worker affected. We will compensate. We will apologize not in words, but in action." She stepped back. Marcus took her place. "I wasn't part of those decisions," he said. "I was sweeping the floors while they were made. But I felt the cost. And now, I intend to help repay it." A reporter called out, "Mr. King, are you suggesting you speak on behalf of the company?" He paused. "Number. I'm speaking on behalf of the people it once ignored." Applause broke out not from the press, but from the employees gathered behind the cameras. That night, as Marcus walked through the nearly empty halls of Carter Tech, he found an envelope taped to his locker. Inside was a handwritten note. "You gave us dignity. We stand with you. Night Crew." He held the note to his chest, overwhelmed. In her office, Rose received a different message, an email from her father's old friend, a retired union organizer. "You're walking a road he would have been proud of. Don't let the storm shake you." The following days were a blur of action. The board approved the reparations fund. Bria, tracked down by reporters, tried to deflect blame, but her name was now synonymous with everything Carter Tech had sworn to change. The King Center held a vigil for affected workers, lighting candles not just for justice, but for remembrance. People shared stories of unpaid hours, of injuries hidden to keep jobs, of silence born from desperation. Marcus listened to everyone. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't raise his voice. "We are more than victims," he said. "We are builders, and what we build now will honor what was lost." The most unexpected shift came from within the corporate world. Other companies, once silent, began to examine their own histories. Panels were formed, apologies issued. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Rose and Marcus were invited to Washington to testify before a Senate Committee on Labor Reform. On the flight there, Rose looked at Marcus. "You nervous?" "No," he said. "You?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But I'd rather speak scared than stay quiet." The hearing room was stark, echoing with years of political theater. But Rose's voice cut through. "This isn't just about one company," she said. "It's about a culture. One that rewards silence over truth, profit over people. We're here to say enough." Marcus followed. He shared not just numbers or policies, but names. Tomas, Lena, the forgotten. "I'm not asking you to fix the system," he said. "I'm asking you to stop protecting the broken parts." That night, the Capitol dome glowed above them like a promise. On the steps, they sat quietly, exhausted. Rose turned to Marcus. "Do you think we made a dent?" "Not yet," he said, "but we swung the hammer." Meanwhile, back in their city, the King Center began receiving letters from across the nation, requests to open branches in Detroit, New Orleans, Fresno. A woman from Kentucky wrote, "My father was a janitor for 40 years. He never got flowers, but your center feels like a bouquet in his honor." In the final days of spring, Rose stood again on the same studio stage where it all began. This time, not for defense, but celebration. "A year ago," she said, "a man handed me a napkin. On it were words that changed me. Today, we've written a new chapter, one of repair, of recognition, of radical honesty." She turned to Marcus, seated beside her. "And to those still in the shadows," she said, "we're coming for you, with light." The audience rose in ovation. Marcus smiled, not for applause, but for something deeper, for the echo of change he could feel rumbling beneath the surface. Justice didn't wear robes. It wore calloused hands and quiet persistence. And its time had come. The summer air was warm but gentle, brushing across the courtyard of the King Center, where a new bronze plaque had just been unveiled. It read, "To those who worked in silence, may your stories now be heard." Rose stood in the background, watching as a group of children from the neighborhood, fresh out of school for the summer, laughed and played around the fountain. The center had been open less than a year, yet it pulsed like the beating heart of the community. Job applications had turned into careers, evening classes were filled with veterans and single mothers, and young volunteers had started tutoring elders in basic tech skills. What started as an act of atonement had grown into a living testament to possibility. Marcus arrived a few minutes later, James clinging to his hand and holding a stack of crayon-colored flyers about an upcoming Family Unity Day. He spotted Rose and grinned. "Still think no one would come?" he teased. She laughed softly. "I underestimated hope." As they walked together toward the community room, they passed a hallway wall filled with photos, faces of former janitors, cafeteria workers, overnight guards. Beneath each image were two words, "Honor Built." Rose stopped at one photo. It was of Marcus, holding a mop in one hand and a notebook in the other. "I insisted on that caption," she said, "because that's what you did. You built this with honor." Marcus looked at the photo, then at Rose. "Number, we built this with truth." That afternoon, a documentary team arrived, funded by an independent arts grant. The project, titled Beneath the Tower, sought to tell the hidden stories of those who supported the nation's corporations from behind the scenes. Marcus was one of the featured voices. As cameras rolled, he told them the story of the napkin not with pride, but with clarity. "It wasn't some master plan," he said. "I didn't even think she'd read it, but I had to try. Because silence is easy, but silence also kills." He paused. "What we do now, speaking, building, remembering, that's how we stay alive." Later that week, Marcus received a letter from a university. They were establishing a scholarship in his name for students pursuing social justice, labor rights, or community development. James had secretly submitted his father's story. At first, Marcus refused. "I don't want a spotlight. I just want change." But Rose said, "You can have both, as long as the light helps others find the path." Meanwhile, Carter Tech had undergone a transformation few thought possible. Its board diversified. Its manufacturing chain was audited and rebuilt. Employees were now part owners. Rose remained CEO, but her office was now on the third floor, near the open plan collaboration area where any worker could walk in. The 44th floor, the executive suite, had been converted into a meditation and counseling space. "Power doesn't need height," she told reporters. "It needs humility." On the anniversary of the King Center's opening, they hosted a community dinner. Hundreds came. Music played from local high school bands. Tables overflowed with homemade dishes, mac and cheese, cornbread, collard greens, chicken pot pie. It smelled like history and hope. Marcus stood at the back, taking it all in. James tugged at his arm. "They want you to say something, Dad," Marcus chuckled. I've talked enough this year. Please? The boy whispered. He couldn't say no. Marcus walked up to the mic, the crowd gradually quieting. I used to think justice was a courtroom, or maybe a headline, he began. But now I think it's this. It's a plate passed across a table. It's a name remembered. It's a second chance given freely. He scanned the room. We didn't just build a center. We built a mirror. One that lets people see who they are and who they can become. A quiet settled over the room, not heavy, but sacred. Marcus looked down, unsure what to say next. Then he added softly, "And to my son James, who believed in me even when I didn't, I hope this world is gentler to you because of what we did." The audience stood in applause. No fanfare, just love. In the weeks that followed, the momentum didn't slow. The King Center inspired similar models nationwide. New grants were approved. Former janitors became council advisors. A national dialogue emerged not just about equity but about legacy. Rose found herself invited to lead an economic roundtable on rebuilding ethical corporations. When asked what kept her going, she said simply, "A napkin." On a quiet Sunday, Marcus sat in the back garden of his apartment. James played with a science kit nearby, mixing colors and laughing when they fizzed. "You ever think about leaving?" Marcus asked. Rose, seated beside him, sipped her iced tea. "Every time things get hard, but I stay, because I remember where we started." "In silence," he said. "Exactly," she nodded, "and we don't live there anymore." As evening fell, James climbed onto Marcus's lap, exhausted from play. "Daddy," he murmured, half asleep, "did we really help people?" Marcus looked out over the city, its lights blinking like stars, the King Center glowing steadily in the distance. "Yes, son," he whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "We help them remember they matter." And in that moment, with the breeze soft, the past honored, and the future wide open, Marcus closed his eyes, knowing they had done something bigger than justice. They had restored dignity, and dignity, once given, never dies. The story of Marcus and Rose reminds us that true justice isn't loud or flashy, it's built quietly, with courage, honesty, and compassion. It teaches us that no act of kindness is too small to spark change, and that the voices of the overlooked can reshape powerful institutions when given a chance. In a world often divided by race and class, their journey shows that dignity, once restored, can heal more than just broken systems, it can heal people.